Hi there, it's Suzanne from BEMO. Welcome to our first BEMO Bytes study session for MS-900. Today's session will focus on Module 1, Cloud Concepts. We will review some sample questions and discuss the reasoning behind the answers. The goal here is to get you comfortable with the types of questions you will be facing and point out some test-taking tips to avoid making common mistakes. We also want to save you time by breaking our sessions into bite-sized chunks so you can retain more. We also want to help you go beyond memorizing and thinking critically. Hopefully, we can give you some aha moments where you think about how to use the knowledge in your job. I suggest you jot down those moments so you can reflect on them later, whether it be in a notebook, OneNote, or just some random sticky notes. And finally, we just want to help you ace the exam. If you haven't already checked out our MS-900 blog and study guide, go to bemopro.com and search for MS-900. Take the time to read the blog. There's a lot of useful information in it, and the study guide is located at the bottom of the blog. Let's look at the study guide before we start into the Outgrow quizzes. The first set of quizzes, 1 through 4, come from the module Describe Cloud Concepts, which is only 10 to 15% of the test. So later we will focus in the next webinar on Describe Core Concepts, Microsoft 365 Services and Core Concepts, because that is the meat of the test. Quiz number 1, Cloud Concepts, Benefits and Considerations. Let's get started. First question. Which two choices of the following are not benefits of cloud computing? Okay, so as part of the study session, I want to help you in exam taking. Part of taking certification exams or any other kind of exam is to read what the question asks and then read it again. In this case, you may have known the benefits and you didn't answer it correctly because you didn't read the question correctly. So the question asks which are not benefits of cloud computing. Also, if you're like me, multiple choice questions are great, but multi-choice questions sometimes strike fear in my heart. Notice it does say in this one which two choices, so you know you're going to have to select two. In a proctored exam, you're not allowed to write things down. And for me, I don't know about you, it's a lot easier to write things down before you answer the question. Like in this case, I know the benefits, so I would like to list that down. You can use, just note that there is a whiteboard in the exam, and I highly suggest you use the whiteboard if you need a visual or you just want to write down what you know, mark the question, go on to the next question. Sometimes the other questions will give you some of the partial answers. You would want to go back to the question after you see the other questions. So I've made a quick table, and we can use process of elimination to determine the two choices that are not benefits. Enterprise software and data are available when internet connection is lost. I think this one is pretty easy. We know that you need a persistent connection to connect to the cloud. You can work offline with some of the apps, but eventually you do need to sync up. Versus on-prem, if you have an on-premises infrastructure, you don't need an internet connection. So we can start off by definitely saying that is one of the answers. Now we have one more to find. So we'll rule out as we go down. Over on the right side, I have high availability as a benefit. And it depends on the service level agreement that you choose, but your cloud-based apps can provide a continuous user experience with no apparent downtime, even when things go wrong. So high availability is not an answer here because it is a benefit. Disaster recovery, by taking advantage of cloud-based backup services, data replication, and geo-distribution, you can deploy your apps and know that your data is safe in the event of a disaster. We know that we can rule out disaster recovery because that's actually a benefit. And while I was talking about that, we also mentioned geo-distribution. One of the choices here is geographic isolation. Geo-distribution is when you can deploy apps and data to regional data centers around the globe. And you can ensure that your customers have the best performance in their region because they can connect to the data center that is closest to them. Geographic isolation would mean that the data center is located in a geographically isolated area, which obviously would not provide a benefit. So we found our other choice. Not a benefit. It's always wise to go through all the choices just in case, and it develops your learning. Elasticity, think of a rubber band stretching dynamically. You can configure cloud-based apps to take advantage of auto scaling so that the apps have the resources they need. Think of a tax application during tax season. It becomes extremely busy. They may need to expand Cloudburst during those times to give additional resources when there's a high demand. Vertical and horizontally scalable. Vertical scalability is a lot like elasticity, but it's not dynamic. So elasticity is it just dynamically happens versus vertical and horizontal are a little more planned. Just know the basic difference. You can visualize this between vertical and horizontal. So vertical, you might, here's your machine, it might be the cloud server, and you would need to add RAM and add CPU to handle all the data requests. That's an example. Horizontal, you may need to increase your compute capacity by adding instances of the resources. So you might need to add across additional virtual machines to handle the load. The last choice was secure, and there might be some confusion there because it is often a concern for customers moving to the cloud. They think their data is just sitting out there ready for hackers to grab it. The customer is always responsible for their data, whether it's in the cloud or on premises. But on premises, the customer has the additional burden of providing physical security to their data center. Whereas in the cloud, there's no physical on-premise security required. And Microsoft provides world-class security, and we'll get an overview of those options when we address it later with the Domain 3. Cloud-based platforms are often more secure than on-premise data centers because the cloud vendors make a significant investment in data protection. And then I just listed a few more over here that weren't in the choice question, but predictable monthly expenses. In the next question, we're going to go over CapEx versus OpEx. Cloud-based services are subscription-based, so that a benefit is a company can predict what they're going to spend per month. Current, that's just automatic upgrades. You're always getting the latest and greatest. And then sustainability, which is a big initiative at Microsoft. Examples would be improved energy efficiency, reducing carbon footprint, and giving that a cloud allows employees to access from anywhere with an internet connection. That would reduce commuter-related emissions. Great, so we've decided these are our two choices that are not benefits. We got it right, only because I already knew the answer. Haha. When you see this question, you immediately go, why do I need to know accounting principles for this exam? And the answer to that is you're still going with the benefits to the customer. So you're trying to weigh in on the financial implications of on-premise versus cloud infrastructure decisions. And most likely, if you're having a sales meeting, the employee who contacted you is gathering information to report back to executive decision makers. And executive decision makers obviously are interested in the financial implications. So to answer this question, you need to know the difference between CapEx, which is capital expenditures, and OpEx, which is operational expenditures. So with CapEx, you spend the money up front. And that has tax implications. They deduct over time. So if you've heard depreciation, amortization, deduct over time. And because of that, then the values lower over time. So the example here would be the on-premises investment, where you buy all the equipment, the software, you maintain it yourself, which adds maintenance plus support expenses. And with support expenses, we could be talking about a very specialized IT staff that you keep on, and versus in the cloud where you might not need as much of a specialized IT staff. It doesn't eliminate your need for an IT staff because you still need to configure, monitor, etc. Conversely, operational expenses, you're being billed and you're paying. Right now. So it's for resources that you're using at that point. So in the case of this is where cloud services falls in, and it is a subscription-based model. So you pay as you go, pay for what you use. From an accounting perspective, operational expenditures can be deducted in the same year that they spend it. Therefore, cloud service expenditures are predictable. And we're going to use all the terms that they use in Microsoft Learn to help you identify those terms in the questions. It's a consumption-based model. Which basically means you're only paying for the resources that you consume. No upfront costs, as the cloud service provider is responsible for the equipment. The cloud service provider is responsible for the purchase and the lifespan of that equipment. So in comparing the two, the consumption-based model has many benefits, and that would be no upfront costs. You're not purchasing all the equipment for your data center and trying to guesstimate what demand you're going to have so you don't over-purchase, for example, periods of heavy demand. So you don't need to purchase and manage costly infrastructure that users might not use to its fullest. And you can, in the consumption-based model, the ability to pay for additional resources when needed, scale and you don't have to pay for that in advance. And the ability to stop paying for resources when they're not needed. So when you need to respond to changes in your business model, that can be easily done. So that was a lot of explanation for simple multiple choice. But by now, when you're looking at these keywords, hopefully this will help you visualize, but recurring monthly subscription, that's going to be OpEx, right? So this is easy. Purchasing and maintaining the computing resources that you use is a CapEx expenditure. So this question, what factors might motivate an organization to move to the cloud, is great for understanding the motivations that might be driving the business you're working with to support cloud adoption. And they more than likely will have several motivators, not just one. So here's a listing of some critical, we're just going to focus on this column, but the critical business events that might prompt a move to the cloud. Data center exit, maybe it's a small business that no longer wants to own their own data center. Merger, acquisition, or divestiture. This can be a pretty complicated undertaking with companies having different infrastructure. You want to simplify collaboration between the merged companies or the newly acquired company. The cloud offers many benefits in this area and will speed the process. So we definitely know that this is a motivator. A reduction in capital expenses. We learned about that in the previous question. So the opposite of capital expenses was operational expenses. So if they want to reduce their capital expenses, chances are good they don't want to maintain on-premise equipment or fully have an on-premise infrastructure. And they have a need to reduce that, not reduce OpEx. So this option is not correct. It would be correct if it was a need to reduce CapEx. End of support for mission critical technologies. Maybe they currently have a server 2003, which has reached end of life. And they're forced to go to the cloud because they can't get security updates anymore. Good reason. So this answer would be correct. Ooh, that's a horrible check mark, but. Response to regulatory compliance changes. A good example here would be HIPAA compliance. If they're a healthcare business, they might want to purchase Microsoft Purview to help with the compliance management. So this is a motivator. We've already got 3, but again, always look at all the choices. New data sovereignty requirements. This is information that's stored. Different countries have different laws regarding sovereignty. Reduction of disruptions and improvement of IT stability. We talked about some of the benefits of geo-distribution, load balancing and failover, disaster recovery. All those are benefits of the cloud. And report and manage the environmental impact of your business under the sustainability. So the only other option we had over here was a need to reduce costs by eliminating IT staff. That's pretty bold to say, eliminating. Obviously, someone needs to manage the identities, the data, configurations. So it doesn't eliminate your IT staff, but it can reduce your IT staff. So now that we know all the motivators, we can select the 3, remember 3 choices, and we're correct. Quiz number 2, we're going to continue on with our cloud concepts, benefits, and considerations with another set of 4 questions. This is a typical question, scenario based. You have to carefully evaluate the scenario. In this case, the scenario starts with the company is focused on minimizing cost. So you have to know which deployment model has the least cost. That's public cloud. This private cloud is the most expensive. And a hybrid combines the two so that you do have expenses, but you can use the public cloud to offload some of those expenses. First option, the company needs to keep complete control over data storage, so complete control is a keyword, and implement cloud bursting to meet resource requirements during peak process times. This sounds like a combination to me. Control, we're looking at private. Cloud bursting, you can use the public cloud to cloud burst. So the combination of the two takes you to hybrid. So hybrid is the answer because it's the least expensive given the requirements. The company is migrating all company mailboxes to Exchange Online. After migration, all users will access their mail through a web-based client. If the company was in the process of the migration, where they were keeping Exchange on-prem with Exchange Online, the answer could possibly be hybrid. But in this case, it says after migration and all company mailboxes will be on Exchange Online. So at this point, you're looking at a public cloud, no hybrid. The company needs the most cost-effective solution to implement a CRM application that supports automatic scaling, benefit of cloud computing, and is accessible from multiple geographic locations, another benefit. So the CRM could be implemented in a public or a private cloud, but a private cloud would be a significantly more expensive solution, and there's no requirement for the isolation that would be provided by a private cloud. So the best solution in this case is a public cloud. Finally, the company needs to deploy multiple virtual machines with connectivity to USB devices. This one's a little bit tricky. USB device connectivity requires that the virtual machine hosts are located on premise. But that's a more expensive option to have your virtual machines in a private cloud on premise. So in this case, a hybrid cloud would be the most appropriate option to be cost effective to support the USB devices. Okay, we got the correct answer. On to the next question. Your company plans to migrate from on-premise to a hybrid cloud deployment. You're required to make sure that the Microsoft platform used for the migration offers hybrid abilities. Which of the following three options meet that requirement? This question is a little bit tough if you've never administered an on-premise Windows server. If you have, it would probably be common sense for you to select the right options. If you've gone through all the Microsoft Learn modules, you should be able to pull the pieces together and use deductive reasoning to answer this. Microsoft Teams is public only, public cloud, SaaS application. Skype for Business. Skype for Business has an online version and the Skype for Business server. The online version has been retired and everyone is being moved to Teams, but the Skype for Business server still exists for on-premise implementations, and you can coexist with Microsoft Teams. So Skype can be offered in a hybrid cloud deployment. Microsoft SharePoint, same thing. Microsoft Yammer is a social networking tool, public cloud offering. Microsoft Exchange, you can have an Exchange server on site as well as cloud-based Exchange. Exchange Hybrid can allow for calendar interoperability between Exchange Online and Exchange On-Premise. Microsoft Viva, that's an employee experience platform, and there are no hybrid capabilities. Microsoft Stream is an enterprise video management service that lets people in your organization create, store, share, and view videos securely. And you can add and consume the videos within other apps, such as Teams, Yammer, Viva, PowerPoint, OneDrive, and SharePoint. Question number 3. A company needs to calculate the estimated cost benefits in migrating workloads to Azure. The estimate should include computing costs, data center costs, networking costs, storage costs, and IT costs for 5 years. What tool should you use? The answer here is Total Cost of Ownership Calculator. And what a great tool. I loaded it here over on the side to help define your workloads and make estimates. And I'm just scrolling through slowly. But you can enter all your customer information, and based on that information, get a report. Here's an easier one. Which of the following best describes flexible work? A combination of traditional in-person office and remote work. Yes, that's flexible, but it says which best describes. So let's read all the options. A work strategy that gives employees the most freedom, allowing them to set their own schedules. So now we can see over here, I pulled up work actually is hybrid work. So the first option is the definition of hybrid work. The second option is the hybrid work model that allows you to combine remote and in-person. What works best for you? It gives employees the most freedom as they can set their own schedules with a combination of the two. So we know this is the answer. And then the last one was essential workers that need access to simple, intuitive, and secure productivity and collaboration solutions. And that would be frontline workers. Quiz number 3. We're still on cloud concepts, but now we're moving to a different objective, cloud services types and offerings. So previously we went over cloud deployment types, which were public, private, hybrid. Where are your resources going to be located? Now we're going to go over service types, which answers the question, what type of resources are we going to use, and how much control do we want over those resources? So I pulled up the famous shared responsibility model, which you really need to have a thorough understanding of this, particularly in the differences between who is responsible for what, cloud versus you. First question, your company is planning to migrate to Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365. You are required to identify a cloud service model that allows for the deployment of a Linux virtual machine. Which of the following is the model you should choose? So looking at this shared responsibility model, we're looking for virtual machine. Here we go. And we want to pick the model that allows for the deployment of the machine. So you're managing the machine, and that would be infrastructure as a service. So simplified, infrastructure as a service is essentially virtual servers that the customer rents from another company that has a data center. Which service model should you use to deliver consumption or trigger-based resource allocation? So the key word here is trigger-based resource allocation. Serverless computing is much like PaaS. In the serverless model, again, it only uses resources when a specific function or trigger occurs, and you only get charged when that function is run. According to the shared responsibility model, which cloud service type places the most responsibility on the customer? This is pretty straightforward. And again, when we look over here at the model, most responsibility on the customer would be you manage. So the most that is green, all right? Obviously, if it was on premise in a private cloud, the most responsibility is there. But infrastructure as a service has the most green. That is your answer. In this case, you may be wondering what Windows as a service is, since that is one of the options. It is not a made-up option, but it is not a service model. Windows as a service refers to how Windows operating systems are upgraded annually to the next version through feature updates. So if you look at this question as which cloud service type places the least responsibility on the customer, the answer would be software as a service. Last question, your company contracts with Microsoft as a platform as a service host to support web and mobile application development. You need to identify management responsibilities. Which of the following is true? So in this case, it's multi-choice, so you can have more than one answer. So read them carefully. Microsoft will be responsible for the network infrastructure, storage, and operating systems. So according to the chart here, we are going with platform as a service, and cloud provider in this case is Microsoft. So first answer, they will be responsible for the network infrastructure. That would be here. The storage and the operating system, but we didn't say anything about the server. But that's assumed because we've already made it to this level, so it includes all these. Second option, Microsoft will be responsible for only the network infrastructure and storage. That option would be if it was infrastructure as a service. So the answer would be this one. The other two deals with the customer responsibility. Let's see which one applies. The customer will be responsible for the application data and applications. So it's saying the customer is responsible for this. The customer will be responsible for the operating system's application data and applications. So it's saying also the customer would be responsible for the operating system, and that is not true. There's your answer. Okay, last quiz. Cloud concepts, cloud services, types, and offerings. Choosing a cloud service scenario. primarily answers what two questions? The first option is, where are we going to deploy our resources? And when you think about where, that would be deployment models: public, private, hybrid. Hardware resources such as servers, storage appliances, and network devices, they all have to physically exist somewhere. It can be on-premise, in your private cloud, or in the public cloud at your service providers, or a combination of the two. Remember, cloud service models, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So the first one is a deployment model, not a service model question. So we're going to rule that one out. How will we pay for our resources? That would be more of a decision after you've chose your service and deployment models. So that is not an answer. How much infrastructure management control do we want? So here you go. This is shared responsibility. What resources do we want to be responsible for? And what resources do we want our cloud solution provider to be responsible for? So yes, that would be an answer. And then finally, what type of resources are we going to use? Your computing needs will drive what type of services you choose. So we have our two answers. Take note that they do focus on serverless computing also as a service scenario. Okay. Next question. What is Microsoft 365? So in the study guide, they ask you to know the difference between Microsoft 365, Office 365, and Windows 365. A fuzzy area now that Microsoft is renaming Office 365 to Microsoft 365, but I'm following the Microsoft Learn module. The link is in the study guide. The explanation here. So Office 365 is a cloud-based service, and you need to know what apps are included: Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook. Those are the apps. Along with services such as Exchange, SharePoint, Teams, and OneDrive. So Microsoft 365 is a cloud-based service that includes the Office 365 plus Windows 10 and 11 now, plus enterprise mobility and security. And you do need to know what is included in enterprise mobility and security. And that is in the big pink area here: Azure AD, Intune, information protection, and advanced threat analytics. You need to be familiar with the subscription plans. They have the personal use, small business, large enterprise, schools, nonprofit, government. When we get into licensing, we will detail this more and bring up the licensing models. So the answer to this question is the first. The second one, a cloud-based service that automatically creates a Windows virtual machine for end users, is actually Windows 365. And there's a link in the study guide that you should review to understand what Windows 365 is. And the last one is a one-time purchase for Office apps to install on one computer. And we know that's not the answer because Soft 365 is subscription based. Okay, which two categories are most Microsoft Azure services placed in? And note they are saying most. Infrastructure as a service. An example of that would be Azure Virtual Machines. Customers can build entire computing environments using the service provider's hardware, software, network, and storage resources. And that's infrastructure as a service. Platform as a service would be Azure App Services, Narrative Service, Cognitive Search, Content Delivery Network, PaaS, IaaS, plus operating systems and development tools. And this shows the difference between the IaaS and PaaS service models. And we know that Windows as a service is not the option we're looking for. That is the biannual feature updates to Windows. So there's our answer. Okay. Thanks for joining me for this study session today. Our next study session will cover Module 2, describe core Microsoft 365 services and concepts. This module is 50 to 55% of the test, so we will be spending some extra time on that session. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn as I will be posting 3 to 4 question quizzes weekly and notifying my followers of the next study session. And as always, I'd love to hear your feedback and ideas.